It's a sunny afternoon in the Wild West, and Buster Scruggs rides his horse through a vast, empty land. He looks like a happy, singing cowboy. Truth is, he's the most dangerous gunman around, and there's a big reward for his capture. As he travels, Buster finds a cantina and stops to get a drink. But the bartender refuses to serve him whiskey, saying it's illegal and only outlaws are allowed to drink it. Buster tries to explain that even though he looks clean and cheerful, he's an outlaw too. But nobody believes him. One cowboy even steps up to fight him. That cowboy quickly regrets it. Buster is unbelievably fast and shoots everyone in the cantina within seconds. Later, Buster arrives in town he's never visited before called Frenchman's Gulch. His first stop is the local saloon. He has to leave his weapons at the door to follow the no firearms policy. Inside, he joins a poker game and is told he has to pick up the hand left behind by the last player. When he sees the cards, he realizes why the player left. They were the infamous dead man's hand. Buster refuses to play it, which makes the other players angry, especially a tough man named Joe. Thinking he's above the rules, Joe pulls out a hidden gun to threaten Buster. But Buster defends himself by kicking a loose plank from the table, knocking the gun back toward Joe and accidentally shooting him dead. The room fills with tension. To ease it, Buster makes up a song about Joe right there in the saloon, and soon everyone joins in singing and dancing. Their fun is cut short when Joe's brother shows up to get revenge. He challenges Buster to a duel. Once again, Buster proves he's the fastest. He shoots off each of the man's fingers before finally killing him, just by aiming through a mirror to show off. Feeling proud as usual, Buster is caught off guard when another singing cowboy arrives, the Kid. He also challenges Buster to a duel. This time, it ends even faster, but Buster is the one who dies. He finally meets someone quicker than him. As Buster's soul rises from his body, he admits he should have seen this coming. You can't stay on top forever. He floats away, singing along to the Kid's song. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, a young cowboy finds an isolated bank and tries to rob it. The bank teller pretends to go along with the robbery, leaning down as if to grab money. But instead, he pulls out hidden guns and starts shooting. Then he runs away. The cowboy dodges the bullets and grabs the cash from the box. But as he runs outside, the teller opens fire again, forcing him to hide behind a well. The cowboy tries to shoot back, but the teller is wearing pots and pans all over his body. The bullets bounce right off. Protected by the makeshift armor, the teller approaches and knocks the cowboy out. When the cowboy wakes up, he finds himself tied to a tree with his hands tied to the saddle of his horse. A group has already found him guilty and sentenced him to death. This is his chance to say some final words. But before he can speak, they are ambushed by Comanche warriors. The warriors kill the entire group, but they leave the cowboy alive on his horse, thinking it's funnier to let him suffer slowly. He spends hours balancing on the horse, trying to keep it from moving and triggering his death. Eventually, a drover comes by and frees him by shooting the rope. He offers to let the cowboy ride with him, but the cowboy isn't lucky for long. Less than an hour later, he finds out the drover is a cattle thief. When another group of lawmen catches up with them, the drover escapes and the cowboy is arrested again. He's taken to town, found guilty by the judge, and sentenced to hang. As he waits for death, he looks into the crowd, focusing on a young woman so that the last thing he sees is something beautiful. Not far from there, an aging impresario is traveling with Harrison, a young man with no arms or legs but an amazing voice. Harrison performs famous speeches and poems by Shakespeare and Lincoln. Their wagon turns into a stage every time they stop in a new town. Harrison recites while the impresario collects money from the audience. The impresario also feeds Harrison, applies his makeup, and even helps him with basic needs. But their life is hard and sad, and the impresario becomes more tired and frustrated every day. When they visit bawdy houses, the impresario doesn't pay for a girl for Harrison. He just turns him around so he doesn't see, but Harrison still has to listen to everything. As they travel through more remote mountain towns, fewer people care about their show. One night, the impresario sees that barely anyone shows up to watch. Instead, there's a crowd gathered around a different wagon where a chicken is doing basic math, pecking out numbers to solve problems. The people love it. Seeing an opportunity, the impresario decides to buy the chicken. He begins caring for it just as carefully as he once cared for Harrison, who is now starting to feel worried about what might happen next. The next day, the impresario stops his wagon near a bridge and tests how deep the river below is by throwing a large stone into the water. The result is exactly what he needs. A short while later, The impresario is back on the road, with only the chicken as a passenger. Harrison is no longer with him, as he had been pushed into the river. Speaking of rivers, there's one flowing down a mountain, where an old prospector has arrived in search of gold. At first, his pan only finds tiny specks of gold, but by carefully counting and observing, the prospector follows a pattern and figures out where he should dig to find the source of the gold. He even sets up camp next to the river, surviving by fishing and stealing eggs from birds' nests. After many days of digging small holes, he finally triangulates the exact spot and starts digging deeper. His calculations are perfect. He discovers a large gold vein that could make him rich. But just as he starts to celebrate, a young man who had been secretly following him appears and shoots him. The young man rolls a cigarette to celebrate his victory, then jumps into the hole to move the prospector's body. But the old man had only been pretending to be dead. He surprises the attacker, wrestles him for the gun, and ends up killing him. Then, the prospector checks his own wound and sees the bullet pass clean through his body without hitting anything serious. He bandages it up, finishes collecting the gold, buries the young man in the hole, and leaves the valley on a horse, carrying his fortune. Meanwhile, siblings Alice and Gilbert have joined a wagon train traveling along the Oregon Trail. Gilbert is not a good businessman, but he claims that once they reach Oregon, a business partner of his will marry Alice. They are also traveling with Gilbert's dog, President Pierce, who annoys everyone in the group with his constant barking. Not long after the journey begins, Gilbert has a violent coughing fit and dies, possibly from cholera. The wagon train leaders, Billy and Arthur, help Alice bury her brother. They ask if she wants to keep going with them or return home. Realizing she has nothing to go back to, Alice agrees to keep traveling west to try her luck in Oregon. The next day, Alice gets more bad news. The young boy Gilbert had hired to guide their wagon, says he was promised a $400 wage and expects half of it when they reach the halfway point. Alice has no money, and if Gilbert had any, it was buried with him in his coat. It's too far to go back, so she turns to Arthur and Billy for advice. They tell her that $400 is a ridiculous amount. It's much more than the usual rate. Alice blames Gilbert's poor business sense, but Billy suspects the boy is lying. He tells her to ignore the demand for now, and when they reach the halfway point, he'll try to scare the boy into telling the truth. Since everyone keeps complaining about President Pierce and Alice doesn't feel responsible for him, Billy helps her get rid of the dog. He takes the dog into the valley and fires a shot into the sky to scare him off. With that, the trip continues without problems. Along the way, Alice and Billy spend time together and discover that they agree on many things. When the hired boy again asks about his payment, Billy tries to talk to him but gets nowhere. He then offers Alice another idea. He tells her he's been thinking about retiring from the wagon train and proposes marriage. That way, he can take over Gilbert's debt and build a life with her. Alice is surprised, but she has also grown fond of Billy, so she accepts his proposal. A few days later, Arthur becomes worried after noticing fresh footprints in the area. He checks on the travelers and finds out that Alice is missing. It turns out Alice had heard President Pierce barking nearby and wandered off to see him barking at prairie dogs, going farther from the wagon train than she realized. Arthur finds Alice and tries to bring her back as quickly as possible. Sadly, they aren't fast enough and get ambushed by a group of Native American warriors. Since Arthur has 2 guns, he uses one to defend them and gives the other to Alice. He tells her that if he gets killed, she should use the pistol on herself, because being captured would mean terrible and painful torture. Arthur is actually a skilled shooter and manages to scare off most of the natives with accurate gunfire. But just when he thinks the danger is over, one of the warriors surprises him, knocking him down with a quick blow. Arthur pretends to be unconscious and waits until the warrior comes closer. Then he shoots him and rushes back to Alice, only to find the worst possible news. Believing that Arthur was dead, Alice followed his instructions and used the pistol on herself. Arthur covers her body with his coat and begins the long walk back to the wagon train, with President Pierce walking beside him. The only thing on his mind now is how he's going to explain everything to Billy. On a different road, 5 people are traveling together in a stagecoach heading toward Fort Morgan. After singing for most of the journey and annoying everyone else, a man named Thigpen finally stops and starts talking. He explains that he and his partner, Clarence, often travel this same route while carrying cargo, hinting at something tied to the roof of the coach, but without saying exactly what it is. Now that the singing has stopped, a conversation begins among the passengers. The fur trapper shares a story about his past relationship with a Hunkpapa woman. even though they didn't speak the same language. He says their bond worked because people everywhere have the same basic needs. Lady Betjeman, a serious Christian woman, is offended by this idea. She says there are only two types of people in the world, the good and the sinful. Her comment starts an argument about human nature. Frenchman Renee joins in, challenging her beliefs, but Thigpen and Clarence mostly just sit back, amused, and only make a few comments here and there. When Renee asks Lady Betjeman if she's been faithful to her husband during the years they've lived apart, she becomes so angry she nearly collapses. Renee sticks his head out the window and tries to get the driver to stop the coach, but the driver ignores him. That's when Thigpen explains that the company's rule is that the coach never stops for any reason. Trying to calm everyone down, Clarence begins to sing a slow, emotional folk song. It works. Lady Betjeman settles down, but the song moves Thigpen to tears. Curious about the two men, the fur trapper asks what their job really is. Thigpen admits they're bounty hunters. He explains that their method is simple. Thigpen tells stories to distract their target, while Clarence quickly hits them and takes them down. Thigpen also admits that he enjoys watching their victims die. He says there's something strangely beautiful in their expressions during their final moments. This creeps out the other three passengers, who are now even more nervous about what's waiting for them at Fort Morgan. When the coach finally arrives, Thigpen and Clarence take their cargo off the roof. It turns out to be a dead body and carry it into the hotel where everyone will be staying. Renee, Lady Betjeman, and the fur trapper stay behind for a moment. They're uneasy and slow to get off the coach. Eventually, they go inside the hotel too. Renee is the last one to enter. He glances back and watches the stagecoach leave, realizing something chilling. If anything goes wrong inside, there won't be any way out.